Greetings. This is what we talked about last week a little bit. We talked about the what I call the genealogy of the covenants. Not that it's brilliant. It's just don't blame somebody else for something that I invented. And the concentric nature of these covenants, they all operate within each other until you arrive at the covenant with Christ. We have arrived at the point in Genesis where God makes a covenant promise. He establishes a covenant in which he promises never again to destroy the earth. So he will not destroy the earth, but he will redeem it. And so an old thing will pass away. So that's not destruction. I mean, I guess you can call it destruction. But the point is that this covenant kind of has an expiration point. Now, maybe it doesn't. You could say it has an expiration date at the moment of redemption, when heaven and earth itself are redeemed. Or you could say, no, that's the ultimate fulfillment. I'm making this up as I go along. That's the ultimate fulfillment of this covenant promise. That the redemption of the heavens and the earth that Paul talks about in Romans chapter 8 is the ultimate fulfillment of this promise. It will go on forever, which I firmly believe. For those who think that, who are looking forward to the day when they will get to leave this earth and leave this body, that'll be short-lived, because this is our eternal destination on an earth that God promised never to destroy. Instead, he will redeem it. Better than it was before Adam, I think, probably. Does anybody want to comment on that? Gomison used to check me. He used to sit there and he used to be able to check me. Now I have Tom, but I don't know what to do when Tom's not here. See what I can get away with saying.
Here he comes.
There's Tom.
Am I making an entrance or something?
Oh, I just said something provocative.
Oh, okay.
I said that the redemption that Paul talks about in Romans chapter 8 and the new heavens and the new earth are the ultimate fulfillment of this promise to never again destroy the earth. Time will run out, but when the time runs out, he won't destroy it. He will redeem it.
That's true.
And that'll be our home in these bodies, only they will also be redeemed.
Yeah.
What does that look like? I have no idea. Neither does anybody else.
But it won't look like this.
It doesn't look like this, although it'll be recognizable, apparently.
So,
Yeah, it's weird. Not enough information. Don't speculate. You don't know enough. You don't know what you know. There's the things you know, and you know them. There's the things you don't know, but you don't know them. And then there's the things you don't know, and you don't know that you don't know them. And the pot of that stuff in the history of redemption and what God's will is so great. Just assume you don't know anything, except a few bare minimums that are necessary. That's all you know. Yeah. He is sparing in the information that he hands out. And he usually doesn't tell you more than you need at the moment. That's the lesson of the Old and New Testament. He says to Abraham, go forth from your house to a place that I will show you. He says to Noah, build a boat, because the end of all flesh is before me. He says to Peter, go with these two men that are showing up at your door up to Joppa. That's it. That's all he says. He says to the centurion who sent the three, what is it? Two soldiers and an attendant and a slave, or the other way around. But he says to the centurion, send for Peter. He'll tell you something. He's got something to say. What Peter's going to say, Peter doesn't know, because Peter doesn't even know why he's going, and he won't know what to say till he gets to the doorstep. He still doesn't know what to say until the centurion says, I don't know, I saw an angel 4 days ago, and he said, you're going to tell me something about how my whole household can be saved. And then the light comes on. But that's the sparing nature of God's, there's a scarcity of willingness on God's part to give information that you don't need I guess would be one way of looking at it. We know enough.
The other side of that is it's God allowing us to grow as we trust him and follow the minimal instructions that we have.
Yeah, and learn along the way
Yeah.
on the job training, on the job.
JT.
Yeah, it's funny how you get to as you move along and you look backwards, it's amazing how much knowledge you've gained that you don't know how you gained it. You know, we've talked about this before, but my sort of skepticism about the question, what has God taught you this week, is kind of based in that. My hunch is the most important things I learned in my life, I don't remember learning them. I just know them. And a lot of the things that I thought were so important were not very important. I was gonna.
And then even Adam, he gives Adam, don't eat of this tree because in the day you do, you're gonna die. And
Leaves it right there. So everybody then just turns around and
Oh.
looks. They just look at the tree. Is he talking about that tree right there? Yeah, that tree.
Is that poison? Do you think he knew about poison?
I don't know. I mentioned I mentioned the Reformations last time. There's three of them. Swiss, English, German, and Swiss. English Reformation was associated with William Tyndale, my own personal Reformation hero. Martin Luther in Germany, and then John Calvin and Ulrich Zwingli in Switzerland. I think it's Ulrich. But they tried to set up, we talked about this a little bit on Wednesday night 2 times ago, but you'll see why it's relevant in a minute. We talked about transubstantiation last week, the Catholic doctrine of the Eucharist, which we have the Lord's table and the difference between them. And Luther they wanted to arrange a reconciliation between Luther and Zwingli so that the Swiss and German Reformations could get on the same page, I think. That was the primary motivation. Well, neither one of them wanted anything to do with each other. But they agreed to do it, and they sat across from this table, which is an interesting story, which I might tell on Wednesday night, the next time I lead it. But Luther vehemently disagreed. These guys fought about everything to the death, literally. And he was, of course, a firm believer in consubstantiation, that Christ is present with the elements or in the elements. Transubstantiation is that the bread and wine are transformed into the body and blood of Christ, and then Christ is re-sacrificed in a non-bloody manner. That's the doctrine. That's the Mass. That's the Eucharist. That's the sacrament. And the Swiss Reformation with the Anabaptists held to a memorial approach. Symbolic is a bad word. It's more than symbolic. My hunch is that the Lord's table and baptism are more important than your average Baptist thinks they are, even though they're called Baptists. It's funny, Baptists are called Baptists, but they often very, very dismissive about baptism. You get to it when you get to it. Hey, when should I be baptized? We get to it when we get to it. Well, in the first century, if you became there was no time lag. They didn't understand a non-baptized believer. So you see it in Acts more than once, where like the eunuch, he hears, Philip preaches the message. He's reading Isaiah 53. Philip preaches the message of the gospel in some form that doesn't get recorded. And immediately the eunuch says, what does the eunuch say?
What does it hinder me to be baptized?
What prevents me from being baptized? I must have saw a river. Right there, I can get baptized. So they stopped the thing right then and there. He didn't say, well, when you get back to Ethiopia, put it on your agenda, put it on your calendar.
Go find a church.
Go find a church over there with a river, or do some dunking. No, they didn't. No, right now they took care of that. And so
Acts 2:38, repent and be baptized.
Repent and be baptized. He skips over faith and all that other stuff to go from repent and to be baptized. Start it, sign it, and seal it. He just talks about those two. But anyway, back to Luther. So Luther, consubstantiation, Christ being with the elements or in the elements, was non-negotiable. And he despised the Swiss reformers for their attitudes about these things. And that's not where the Anabaptists split with them. The Anabaptists split on infant baptism versus believers' baptism. and I need a church historian. I need Gomes in here right now to keep me out of trouble. But anyway, so they had this meeting over across from, they sat across from each other at this table with the firm intent of not agreeing on anything. And they walked away not agreeing on anything, which is an interesting story. And I think they still have that table because Luther carved into it, which we can get to some other time. He carved into the table and he was making a point until you can refute this passage. It's carved into the table, and he just kept pointing to the passage. But anyway, why did I say all that? So consubstantiation, then the his contempt for the memorial approach to the Lord's table. He hated transubstantiation, right? I mean, he had not believed in transubstantiation, that the bread and wine were transformed into the body and blood of Christ. But his hatred of the Swiss and their memorial approach was so great. He once wrote, I don't know why I remember this. This is from the 90s that I've taken a class. I took a class when I was took some graduate classes, and I still remember this quote. He said, I'd rather drink blood with the papists, Pope, with the people who believe in the Pope. I'd rather drink blood with the papists than break bread with the Swiss, meaning participate in their memorial Lord's table. And I still remember it. It's so poetic and it's so Martin Luther. But yeah, I'd rather drink blood with the papists. They're transformed, the body and blood of Christ. I'd rather drink blood with the papists than break bread with the Swiss. But he was a remarkable writer, widely regarded as one of the 3 or 4 greatest writers in German history, period. Extraordinary writer. His book On the Bondage of the Will, in my view, has never been refuted. That was written in the 16th century. None of that has anything to do with what we're talking about today. So we're making our way here. This is our area of the world that we're studying. And we are just left, or we are in the process of leaving. Where is it at? Not on this map. Oh, that's why I put up this map. Let's use this map. So where's Israel? By the Mediterranean. Be more specific. Where's Israel on this map?
Syria.
Right here. That's Israel. They will conquer the land of Canaan from the east, go over the Jordan, and then their first hit will be Jericho, and so on. We're off to the races. Book of Joshua. But anyway, we're up here somewhere with the flight. When Noah makes his soft landing, he's up here somewhere, according to the text. So they're still digging around over there, looking for something. And by golly, there's some pretty good evidence of it. Just like there's pretty good evidence of the Garden of Eden, for that matter. But anyway, then the story will move to the east, where we will meet right here, Abraham, and then goodness flows to the west, where you see what we were just looking at, this. And so Abraham then, from the land of the Chaldeans, right here, Chaldea, just means city. He will move up to Haran, and then he will, all this is under the providence of God, but the spoken providence of God is that he moved down to Canaan. And then eventually we end up back in Canaan after 400 and some odd years of slavery in Egypt. And so that's the story of Exodus, and we're at the beginning of the launch point, in a sense, post-flood. If there's one word that I was going to use, that I would use to, I don't know, characterize this covenant right here at the bottom. Just a minute, let me get rid of these footnotes. It would be hope. In a situation, I mean, is there a lower point in human history than this? There is going to be the Armageddon, the Great War. But for humanity, I don't know how it gets worse than this. Let's hope it doesn't get worse than this. So it's all up from here. But this at the lowest point, when there's a man and a woman, man and wife and three sons and three sons' wives alive on the face of a planet with nothing and barrenness, this is the covenant that injects hope. And this is the beginning of hope that will eventually culminate in Christ and eventually in his second appearing when redemption is at hand. And we did pretty good last week. We started talking about the covenant again. So he mentions the covenant in chapter 8. He closes with that. Oh, I forgot one more thing. I got to correct myself actually, because I listened to the feed again. I said last week, we talked about the crash in the 1970s, the Andes Mountain. I said it was a soccer team. It's funny what hangs around. It's 50 years ago for me. It's funny what hangs around in your head. I always thought of it as the crash of a soccer team. I was partially right. It was they chartered a plane, the Old Christians Club in Uruguay, chartered an airplane, and it crashed. Wherever it crashed, I don't know where, it doesn't matter where, Andes Mountains, wherever that is. And there were 33 survivors of the crash or something like that, and 16 ended up walking out. And they did so, they survived because the survivors resorted to cannibalism. And I didn't know this part, I didn't remember this part, but apparently there was an international backlash. Yeah, so the crash just killed 12, leaving 33 survivors. 11,500 feet, so pretty cold. So then looking for escape route. The escape was amazing. They're on the other side of a river for some herdsmen. They can't communicate, so they end up writing something and putting it, tying it to a rock or something, and they threw it across the river to these herdsmen who actually went away and came back the next day. And then the herdsmen saw the thing, and then they went and notified the authorities, and then they got rescued. But anyway, there was caused a backlash right here until one of the survivors claimed that they had been inspired by the Last Supper, in which Jesus gave his disciples bread and wine that he stated were his body and blood. The explanation helped sway public opinion, and the church later absolved the men. So I'm assuming that they're talking about the Catholic Church, which is why it would probably hold more weight. I mean, it's not going to carry any weight with me, you know. If I'm going to look the other way at it, it's not going to be because, well, you know, Christ, body and blood. No, that's not why I would look the other way. I would look the other way because in traumatic, desperate circumstances of panic, you know, you don't know what, you give people wide latitude because you don't know what you would do. And it wasn't like they killed people so they could eat. They just, you know. Anyway, enough of that. Okay, so now we're back to this covenant. So he gives them the mandate, like he did in chapter 2, be fruitful and multiply. And he alters it a little bit by including that before it was rule over the earth, now it's, and the fear of you will be on every beast of the field, and so on and so forth, bird of the sky, and we talked about that. And then the second one was a prohibition against eating things with the blood and with murder. That's how he modified. So whereas before there was a prohibition against eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Did I get that right? There was a knowledge of good and evil, right? That was the tree. Before it was that, this time it's murder. That's the prohibition in this case. And then there's this sort of poetic reference to the image of God. So the image of God, we know here, survived all this depravity, which means it's not eradicatable. If it can survive the depravity pre-flood, what do you say? The antediluvial, is that the word? Antediluvial depravity, then the image of God can survive anything. And he honors that. And because he is made in the image of man, there is this absolute prohibition against murder, which probably characterized the time before. Okay, so then there's the covenant. We already read this last week. I'll read it again and then point some things out which become obvious now when you see the red or pink or whatever that is. God spoke to Noah and to his sons with him, saying, now behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, and every beast of the earth with you. So you can see the repetition of chapters 1 and 2. Of all that comes out of the ark, every beast of the earth, I establish my covenant with you, and all flesh shall never again be cut off by the waters of the flood. There's once again, the repetition of the covenant. Neither shall there again be a flood to destroy the earth. Redundant, redundant, redundant. God said, this is the sign of the covenant which I'm making between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all successive generations. So now it becomes explicit. He is making a covenant with us, with the human race. First, he's looking beyond Noah into the future. It's one of the few times where you see this happen. We think it's more often than it really is, but you often get the sense, the text is, in my view, often approached from, yeah, he's talking to the guy in front of him, but he's really looking over his shoulder, and he's really mainly interested in us down the way, 2,000 years later. I don't know, a little egocentric? A little. You got to get there through the person he's talking to. Get to your application through the person he's talking to. He's talking to that person. So honor that. It's like Jesus going, no, I'm talking to him. Listen carefully. I'm talking to him. So, but here's a case where he is literally looking over the shoulder of Moses, and it's as if he's talking and to all successive generations. Who did I say this time? Did I say Moses again? Okay. It's the last time I'm saying Moses. Till the next time I say Moses. I will never again say Moses when I met Noah until the next time that I say Moses instead of Noah. But continue to say it, even though I'm never going to do it again. I set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a sign of a covenant between me and the earth. What? So it just went from Noah to successive generations to the earth. That's what his covenant now is with. This is a covenant between me and the earth. Talk about corporate solidarity. We talked about that last week, right? Everything, the whole created order treated as some sort of single entity that he makes a covenant with. And it shall come about when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow will be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, which he's repeated, and now again, and never again shall the water become a flood to destroy all flesh. Repetition, repetition, repetition. When the bow is in the cloud, then I will look upon it to remember the everlasting covenant. Now all successive generations to everlasting covenant between God and, repetition, every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. And God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. So, what is his point? Well, his point is the thing that he says 7 or 8 times in the text. That's his point. And so we are the recipients. We stand here today because we are recipients, no less worthy, in my opinion, of destruction than those people that went down without the ship in the flood. No less worthy. And I think we have to remember that at every moment, every single human being on the face of the planet now, who ever existed, in a sense, exists in a state of grace. God has graciously condescended to keep humanity here alive and not destroy them in spite of their worthiness to be destroyed. And maybe that's the most important so far lesson, application. I don't know what word to use there, but it just strikes it. Anytime you get any sort of sense of your betterment, your betterness, your superiority over the person who has never heard, however you want to think of that, just remember this right here. You only continue on this planet so long as God keeps his covenant. Yeah.
and Moses, and Noah found grace. That was the only reason he was in the ark. Because he was just as deserving as those who went down with him.
Yeah, and you know, when you see what happens after, it's in the blood.
Genetic.
I mean, look what's going to happen. It's they get out of the ark and it's a 1 potato, 2 potato, and it's off to the races again. And so, you know, there's the solidarity with theirs is the only gene pool. Well, no, there's the wives, but you know, but I mean, there's the gene pool. The gene pool is the same as Noah's. And yet here we are. I mean, look around this place. It's unbelievable. So it's in the blood, so to speak. And it's always the antidote to any sense of pride or arrogance. Or even the idea that God would be under any obligation. I mean, it's not exactly a beach conversation. When I was on staff with Campus Crusade in the 90s, you know, I went to Ocean City, New Jersey for a summer with students. We take 50 or 60 students there, and you walk up and down the beach and talk to students. We talked about that before. And I did the same thing in New Hampshire, you know, and, you know, you just see wide ranging, you know, you invade these students' spaces on these beach where they're just laying there on the beach looking at girls, bored most of the time. There's nothing to do. And there's there, you know, it's like a party. It's like a college party. You get all wound up to go to all week long to go to this party at college, you know, whatever, dorm party, frat party, whatever, on Friday night. And you get there and everybody just kind of stands around for, you know, a few hours and then everybody goes home. And that's, you know, and then a lot of people measure the success of the night by how little they can remember with the statement, I got so wasted. It's a strange ritual. But anyway, so, you know, usually on these beaches, when we would do this, you know, everybody's terrified to do this kind of, including me. I don't like doing it either. Nobody does. Until you get in a really good, and it's funny because I was never accosted in any way, shape, or form. Not one single time. So it was all for nothing. All the tension was for nothing. But, you know, you get in these conversations and this kind of question, it's the go-to question. What about the person who's never heard? You know, then how do you talk about the person who has never heard? Well, this is how you talk about the person who's never heard. Look up and down the beach, every single person on this beach and everywhere else on the planet, whether they heard or not, is in solidarity with this crowd here. That's about the person who's never heard. None of those people ever heard. I mean, it's whoever heard Noah, but other than that, none of those people ever heard. He just perished them. It's not worth saving. And so here we are, but now with covenant, with two covenant. Well, with a covenant within a covenant within a covenant, and then within a covenant, you know, we've been the recipients of a lot of covenants, and every one of those covenants really brings blessing to us. I got to think about how Moses did. I'll think about it later. But, you know, not hard with the others. The blessings of the covenant, and not just the covenant in Christ, not even, I mean, it's the covenant with David, brings us to Christ. The covenant with Abraham produces the line of Judah that brings us David. And Noah and Abraham will be a son of not Shem, who was a son of Noah. You know, so it's genealogical blessing as well as we move through that. Although Moses was Levite, but you get the point. It all comes through Noah to Abraham, and then on we go. So thank God for covenants. And what's funny is so many people not only could they not, especially you can see it right at this particular time, not possibly care less about these covenants or any of them. Just the flat out rejection, the flat out rejection of their creator. You know, this contempt for him. And in response, you know, he stays his hand because, you know, he made a covenant and he keeps his covenants. Speaking of covenant, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times in 10 verses. Pretty important. But should read my notes. Anybody else want to say anything while I get caught up?
You mentioned not worth saving, that, how does that? And I'm just thinking through, like, for God so loved the world, you know, and then not worth saving. You know,
I was referring to the,
read-
yeah, I spoke carelessly, but I was speaking, the people before the flood. He just wiped them out. Said, I'm not gonna bother. God doesn't think like that, but he saved one. He saved a very, very small remnant. We have a remnant God. He saves the remnant. He pulls the remnant out of the mass, and then he acts on behalf of the remnant. And that, in a sense, is true even post-flood. He makes a covenant with the human race, and within the bounds of that covenant, he will choose a remnant and redeem them.
In and of themselves. Every intention of their thoughts of their heart was only evil. In and of themselves. Now God superimposes himself on that and says they're my creation. And I love them enough to send my son to die for them. But if in and of themselves, they're not worth saving.
Yeah, I was a little careless in that statement, but I don't know if it's wrong or not.
But it depends on your perspective.
Yeah.
The perspective of mankind, they weren't worth it.
What was that?
Make the argument that nobody did it anyway.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, you're dealing in the worth of a human in the eyes of God. What is the worth of a human? You know, we make statements like, all humans are valuable. All life is sacred to God. All humans are valuable. Are those true statements? All life is sacred to God. All humans are valuable to God. God loves everybody equally. We make these statements and they're unevaluated. They're not reflected on. And those types of statements, you got to stop and think about them for a minute. And I have no intention of answering them right now, but
we can bring us back to, it says, or in the image of God. He made me."
Right.
So God's image is there, and that is what the value comes in.
yeah, it does.
It's
But
God's image.
when you say the human, let's say I say the human race is worth it. God said the human race is worth it, so I'm going to do. It implies that they had some merit, redeemable merit, redeemable characteristic or something. That's the idiom worth it. Is this house really worth it? You know, well, it implies that the house, you're looking for some value in the house in and of itself. Does the house have any value in and of itself? It doesn't. Oh, I'm not gonna bother.
But if you know who made it, you have a connection to who made it, it might have value to restore.
Yeah, the human
And our image is God's, and He wants that.
humans have value because God values. Is this true? There's another statement like that. Because God values
Our
humans.
value is totally wrapped up with God being our creator.
So if God did, which is impossible to think about, but apart from God, without God in the picture, do humans have value?
We jump up to verse 6. For in the image of God, he made man.
He made them.
Which is what
He made them by virtue of the image of God. He made them having. There's an argument about gold. You know, people buy gold. I have gold. Whether gold has intrinsic value, and well, does it? I don't know. It depends on from whose perspective. Does it have intrinsic value from the vantage point of the chicken in the chicken coop? You know, or the bird flying over the air, or I don't know why I picked birds twice. You know, the raccoon that walks across the lawn. Does gold have any? If there's an egg here, and there's a 5-pound gold bar right there, which one is the raccoon going to go for? if there's a worm right here and a 5-pound gold bar right there, which one is a chicken going for? So if there's a human there, which one is a human going for? He's going for the gold. So gold has value intrinsic in the sense that humans seem to innately value it, which gives it value intrinsic in that sense. In the eyes of humans, it has value, and it seems to transcend time and space and so on and so forth. And you could say the same thing about, I'm really making this up as I go along, but you could say the same thing in the eyes of God. He has implanted in every human the image of God, and by virtue of that, they have value to God. But he's the one who put it in there. I mean, it's not like I put the value in the gold. If somebody dug it out of the earth and turned it into a bar, right? But in his case, he's the one who put the value in there, and so he values it. What he is it? You could say it another way. Is it just that it's not so much the human as he values as it is the image of God in the human? Why did he make the promise? I shall never again destroy the human race because he's very valuable. He's worth it. I shall never again destroy the human race because he doesn't say that here exactly, but because he's made in my image. I implanted in him the image of God. That's why I'm not going to do it. So I guess it depends on your perspective, on how you think about, is the human race worth it? We certainly think we are. I mean, we are full of ourselves.
In First Peter chapter 1, verses 20 and 21, it talks about that God knew that he was going to send the Son to die for us, before he called the world into existence. You know, he knew that man was going to sin before he even created anything. And so he still, but just because we're made in his image, he has a reputation to uphold that image in us. So even before he called the world, Christ knew he was going to come down to this, become a baby and take on a form of a body and going to die. Even before he said, okay, we're going to create man, we're going to create the world and everything on it, he already knew that was going to happen. So his image is God's image is very important to himself.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Thank God he implanted his image in you. Because that is the difference between you and everything else. And you don't get credit for any of it. And that's why you're a subject of his grace. You're an object of his grace. Because you have his image. You are bearers of the image of God. In the case of Christ, just to clarify, he was not made in the image of God. He is the image of the invisible God. Not that you were saying the opposite, I know you weren't. But... Okay. That's kind of interesting. That's easy for me to say. I'm the one who said most of it. I find the subject fascinating because you get out of theology very quickly into all kinds of unevaluated thoughts where people say things and there's conventional wisdom to this stuff, or foolishness. Most conventional wisdom is conventional foolishness once it's evaluated. You look at the conventional wisdom and very often you can say that's conventional foolishness, and it just you keep throwing it on that pile until you're left with a very small pot of conventional wisdom. But the conventional wisdom is that God owes the human race in some way. Like he's got to, by golly, make an effort for everyone or something like that. And I'm not sure where they're reading that.
What is God obligated to do?
Well, can you say he's obligated to keep his covenants?
Yeah, keep his promises, keep his covenant, yeah.
But not by anything outside of himself. He's very, very well aware. He has no regrets. He never had a single regret in his life, so to speak. He never said, man, I wish I would have done this other thing instead. That's the good and acceptable and perfect will of God that we read about in Romans 12, if I can use it out of context a little bit. But anyway, as far as, the application of this here today, man, it just screams out at me. And it's that word that's used 7 times. And I'm under the covenant of Christ, with Christ, but only because I was first under the covenant with Noah. I corrected myself.
All
right. Is that it for the covenant stuff? Let's see. Let's talk about the rainbow. I'm thinking. Well, let's talk about the sign of the covenant. I'll take it. The rainbow. Fascinating thing, because it has now become a symbol of unremitting hostility to God in our culture. Coincidence? I don't think so. Can't prove it. But it is a symbol both ways now. It is a symbol of God's covenant grace and a symbol of rejection of the very idea of the creator and image-bearing nature of humanity in the male and female. That's what that thing is now. As a friend of mine said, how did we lose the rainbow? How did we lose the rainbow? And I think I would say, well, I think there might be forces at work beyond any human control that were involved in that. It's a little too on the nose to be just random. A little too on the nose. Of all symbols of covenants, that's the one.
But you don't look outside of the rainbow, a real one, and not, I mean, if you've heard the story of the kid, and no, that God made that. All the little fake drawings, yeah, that's what they did, but not the ones.
Nobody's impressed by rainbow flags, they're more impressed by an actual rainbow.
Yes.
That's another thing with regard to that. I know we're delving into, let's call it culture wars, which I'm fine with. That rainbow keeps changing. And it's rapidly becoming a symbol of competition. Who gets to be the top stripe? And so one of the things that's happened recently is all those Fruit Loop colors have moved down. And at the top now is black and brown. Shall we look?
What kind of rainbow is that? Black and brown? It doesn't look like that in the sky.
But the rainbow's not the only thing that's been.
Project.
I think of the word awesome. And you think of the
Oh.
awesomeness of God, and it was only always used, and now it's just another word. They're just, everything's watered down to get it away from being the awesomeness of God.
They're right here.
There's light in that flag again, who's gonna protect?
Sorry. What you say, I was like. there's light in that flag.
Somebody's gonna throw that.
Oh. That's wrong with that.
Wow,
There it is.
right there.
Are those to stand for skin colors or? is that
Yeah,
what they're
sure.
doing?
This is dangerous. I'm not gonna click that link. What are you doing, Gary? Anyway. Yeah. All right, that's enough of that.
You were wise.
I know.
You chose wisely.
Yeah.
That's right. All right, so that's the rainbow. That rainbow in the sky never changes. That rainbow is a matter of physics. Let's call it physics. It cannot be otherwise. Humans can try as they might and do anything they want. They will never be able to change that rainbow in the sky. And it symbolizes today what it has always symbolized from the very beginning. And it will never change. Period. It's, my hunch is that one of the questions that's interesting here, that's the wrong passage, is I set my bow in the cloud. Is this new? Is that new? The cloud. Are we seeing rainbows for the first time because we're seeing clouds for the first time? Atmospherics has changed, which is what I think. So when I see clouds, I see more reminder of instability. Every day is different. In fact, clear days here are very rare. You're going to see clouds. Other places, they're common. Arizona and so forth, but I don't know. I don't have a lot more to say about the rainbow except like a bunch of other things, you can look out on it. The seasons, those empty fields out there, seed time and harvest, the snow out there when it was 90 degrees 3 months ago or 4 months ago or something like that. Those are all reminders of the changes that have occurred, but the grace of the covenant remains.
I think the rainbow is just a symbol of God's love for us. He basically said, I'm not going to destroy the earth by flood. Not that this earth doesn't have floods and people don't die in floods still. But it's not gonna, it's just a symbol that God said, I'm never gonna destroy the earth by water anymore and again. And so it's just a symbol of his love for mankind.
Yeah, if you want your "for God so loved the world" representation in the time of Noah, here it is right here. This is covenant.
Because I mean, you still see, even if it doesn't rain, sometimes you still see a rainbow. I mean, most time you see a rainbow, it's because it's rained and God brings the rainbow into our life, but sometimes you still see some of the rainbow, even if it's not a whole rainbow, even if it doesn't rain. So it's just a reminder of his love for us.
Let's see. I wrote down the bow was the consummate representation of warfare in the ancient Near East. That's an interesting thought. It wasn't mine. He calls it a bow here. But of course, at that time, the bow was a symbol of warfare, the symbol of warfare. And now it's this radical radical new meaning, peace between God and humanity.
Well, I would think Noah and his son, having experienced this, the next time it rained, they'd be all like, okay, you didn't tell me to build a boat this time.
And
Uh-oh.
there was probably a lot of those days.
Yeah.
Everything is
Well,
more unstable even than it is today.
yes, the atmosphere changed, and so they needed God to tell them, okay.
Yeah. So it's going to rain now,
I'm gotta come.
And it's
Yeah.
okay.
and it's going to rain hard.
Because we're gonna have this seed time and
Yeah.
harvest, and so it's gonna have seasons, and it's all different.
So-
And they're changing to this, and God had to give them some.
So the rain stops. The rain finally stops. You hold your. It's very personal to Noah. Look, this is the way it is now. But just so you know, you're going to see that rainbow, and you're going to know that I'm not destroying. And so that rain stops, and you see that rainbow, and you go, okay, everything's okay.
God's keeping us there.
Yeah. For about one more chapter.
No, but God keeps his covenant.
God keeps his covenant.
Period. God doesn't go back on his.
Imagine the storm, everything else in the ocean. The only big storm now.
Yep. Now the sons of Noah came verse 18. Out of the ark with Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. Oh boy. That is a name out of all importance to its simple location. Just simply introduces the name Canaan. Ham was the father of Canaan. Every single Israelite's ears perk up. Right? Because they're not in the land yet. Or now they are in the land. Now they have the sacred writing, they have the Torah. And it's, I don't know, it's Joshua, where they're writing the book of the law on the rock, however much of that writing happened of all this stuff. But there's an origin story going on here. Why? There's an answer to a question. If you ask the question, why was Genesis written? One of the answers is to explain how the Israelites ended up in Egypt. Because that's how the story ends. The story will end with Israel in Egypt, with the genealogy of Jacob, the clan of Jacob in Egypt as slaves. So that explains why 400 years later, they're in Egypt as slaves. And they were not abandoned. It's very clear in those late chapters in Genesis, their move to Egypt was a matter of God's provision. So it's not a matter of punishment that they became slaves in Egypt for 400 years. Go ahead. Okay. So now, why did we get the land? Why did he rip this land out of the hand of the Canaanite? And there's a bunch of tribes that are going to be mentioned, and give it to us. Is it because we're worthy of it? Because we're so great? Oh, was he going to be? We'll talk about this later. Is he completely clear? You can eliminate that thought right off the bat. Has nothing to do with why I gave you the land. The giving you the land had its roots all the way back into the first story after the flood.
Was this written when they were wandering? Did he get this history right after they left Egypt?
I think they got this history at some point in the desert.
Because they're heading towards,
That's right.
Certainly written before they
got there.
went into the land, because Moses didn't go in. Moses wrote it.
We got to stop there. So that's the important thing. He mentions this name, and from here till Abraham, it goes south again. He mentions the name of Cain, and then it's going to go south when Cain kills Abel, and then off to the races. This is kind of represents off to the races, and it's going to start inside of Noah's own family. And you get this, you're going to get this pronouncement against, you're going to get these decrees. Another one was the one that Isaac is going to give against Esau. Esau will serve Jacob, for example. And here you see that kind of thing. So this is inversion that goes on. Although Ham here is the middle son. Shem, Ham, and Japheth. But that's what we'll talk about next time. Now we're out. This is more than just story. This is why things ended up the way that they did. And it all had to do with the plan of God. And so there's, the promise of God and the punishment of God, there's the blessing of God, the curse of God. You get this blessing of the covenant, and then immediately you're going to get this curse on one particular family unit, Canaan, and then it's just going to go. And then now we're set up to understand what happens with the covenant promise in Genesis chapter 15, when he says, I'm going to give the land of Canaan. You're going to be ready to understand why he gives the land of Canaan to Abraham. And we'll pick up there next time. Okay, who did I get left with?
We're still here.
Hi, Naomi.
Hello. That was really interesting.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot to do with Genesis a lot of the time, but oh well. The way it goes. Everything okay?
Yeah, we're good.
All right. Nate, you out there?
Better every time.
Say that again?
Your speaking and everything is wow, it's God is watching, basically.
Thank you. Pretty good source material.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll see y'all later.
Adios.
Bye, Gary. Thank you.
Yep.